Hello everyone, Guy here. First off, I wanted to apologize for this episode being as late as it is, and the audio issues present in the episode. Secondly, this episode deals with some rather heavy subjects, including mortality, trauma, and a mention of suicide. Lastly, I want to get a little real with all of you for a moment. The world right now feels pretty volatile, and that can be really overwhelming. I should know. It's at times like this when mental health is at its most important. I've provided a document in the show notes with a lot of really good resources, and if you have the emotional energy, check in on the people you care about. Any amount of good, no matter how small you think it is, makes life that much better. And sometimes just the act of offering a hand is all the help someone needs. With that, on with the show.
Disk space.
Hello everyone and welcome to Disk Space, the monthly podcast where we all play video games and then talk about it. I'm sure that's very descriptive and doesn't describe, about a million other podcasts on the platform. But I'm Guy. This month we're playing Final Fantasy IX. Who else do we got with us?
There's Tony, the marketing director of Faustian Nonsense, and I suggested this game because it's like my favorite.
Wow.
Or it is my favorite, I guess, not like my favorite.
But you like it, and it is your favorite.
That is valid.
Who else do we got?
Hello, I'm new. My name is Azrael. I'm new. This is my first time doing this, so this is going to be a great experience, everyone. Final Fantasy IX is my favorite Final Fantasy. Is it the best Final Fantasy? It has the best character in Final Fantasy, so does that answer your question? But
That's how we met. We bonded over Final Fantasy IX at DragonCon.
It's true. That's how I met Tony.
For like 4 hours straight.
That's a different story.
It's true. I still have not untangled my wig from that, but it's fine.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Oh my god, who was that?
I'm Hannah. I am from Ghosts on a Train, and I guess Super Suits at least soon. I don't know when this is coming out.
Soon, TM.
I don't play video games.
You don't play video games, and yet this is the second episode you've been on. How about that?
Yeah, I'm the podcast token non-video game person.
You experience.
Only sort of. I'm Greg. I'm the person who actually played the video game, while Hannah was present and voiced characters with me. I'm also from Ghost on a Train. I GM and edit it, and yeah, I played FF9 as a kid, but on my neighbor's PlayStation 1. So they wouldn't let me save, and they wouldn't let me borrow it because I didn't return games often. So
oh, no.
I really enjoyed the first bit up until the end of the ice cavern 2 or 3 times. So very nostalgic for me. Very nostalgic first hour or two.
They didn't let you save? What is memory card real estate? Was that fucking strict then?
Apparently. All right, so, Tony, you picked out this game. This is actually like kind of a replacement for your original choice, which is Dark Souls 3. Which would have been a very different episode.
Yeah, that'd be a way different vibe.
Why Final Fantasy IX, other than that it is, your favorite?
It's something I guess we'll talk about more, but like this game kind of ends up helping me like reflect on a lot of different parts of my life because I see myself in various aspects of various characters.
Yeah.
And I recently just got a giant Final Fantasy IX tattoo of Steiner and Vivi, so
Sure
I guess
did.
I was feeling nostalgic.
It kicks ass.
Yeah, Final Fantasy IX. Let us begin at the beginning. And, well, Tony, you've already played it about a million times. Greg and Hannah. Let's start with Hannah because this is kind of like your first real experience touching the game. But what did you think?
I had a good time. So for background, I guess, I did not actually play this game. Greg and I are roommates.
Oh my god, they're roommates.
Yeah, and also friends, I guess, technically. What happened, the way we did this was Greg played the game, and I sat there and watched Greg play the game, and also we read the dialogue for all the characters together in funny voices. So I have no real commentary that I can offer on the gameplay because I simply did not engage with that. But I thought that there was a nice, charming set of characters and a big world to play in, which was very fun. I can't identify a time in the course of watching Greg play the game that I was not like having a good time, which is rare for me. I'm extremely critical.
That's high praise.
And I do have criticisms.
We'll get there, not to worry.
But I was having a very nice time the whole way through, which was really nice. It was very long. And I wish that it had moved a little faster because I don't play video games. And so I am used to when I put 15 hours into something, getting somewhere. But
exactly.
Welcome to Final Fantasy!
That's all of them are like that.
It is literally all of them. That's actually like when I started playing Final Fantasy XIV, which is the MMO. I was so used to like WoW and Guild Wars 2 that I had kind of forgotten that no, Final Fantasy XIV is still a Final Fantasy game. And so here I am playing in a 45-minute cutscene and I'm like, oh right!
On brand.
You're going to get narrative and you're going to
the
like
name.
it.
But I'm glad you had a good time. Do you have anything else to add? Or
not at this juncture. Overall, yeah, fun time.
all right, because it's going to be the same audio track and easier for me. Greg, what did you think of Final Fantasy IX that you didn't get to play when you were a kid?
Post Ice Cavern.
Post-Ice Cavern. Oh,
Post
real
Gizmo
big. Let me tell you, the furthest I'd ever gotten was Garnet, getting to name Garnet something. So, like, I literally hit that, and, like, to Hannah, I had a moment, like a Samwise Gamgee, like, one more step and I'll be further than I've ever been. But, yeah, it was really nostalgic in the beginning bits. The active time battle system, which Hannah probably has some gameplay opinions. She's just saying, like, oh, I can't really have them because I didn't play it. But I remember we started, and Hannah was like, oh, I knew this was turn-based, but this looks very silly. And I can't deny, it does look kind of silly. But, like, I am also very appreciative of how how interesting the active time battle system is, especially now that I'm, like, older and can get it more. And also the game Beyond, very good. I typically stayed away from a lot of Final Fantasies just because of the length, but also, like, I'm expecting it. So the pacing is, like, about what I expect for Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like Steiner a lot. I do kind of wish that he got through his arc a little bit faster, and I'm still kind of in the middle of it, but that's fine. And other than that, for opening thoughts, I kind of want to humiliate Hannah a little bit here.
Shocker.
Okay, so I've been to Hannah. I was like, hey, do you want to play the game or do I? Because we both want to be on the episode and I want to play this game. Do you want to, like, have the controller or do I? And Hannah was like, oh, well, I mean, I don't super care about video games, so, like, it doesn't matter to me. It seems like you really want to do this. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll take the controller. So we started up the game, and the opening cutscene shows, like, a map. Or not even an open cutscene, like the before menu thing. It shows a map. And one of the locations on it is, like, Tifa. And Hannah goes, huh, isn't that a person? And I go, oh yeah, I mean in 7, but I guess in 9 it's a place. And that was actually an indication of something that I didn't realize. So I start the game up and Hannah goes, huh, why does Cloud have a tail in this one? I didn't know he was a tail. And I was like, what?
They had played 7 before and that was all. No one told me that the different Final Fantasies were different. Why would someone assume that all of the games named Final Fantasy were different?
No, it's a
really
fair
is.
assumption, like, especially when you're not connected to
Oh
it.
yeah, it was a fair assumption, but I didn't realize. I was like, oh, that's why you're asking about Tifa. That must have been so confusing to you.
Yeah, it was!
Is this the part where I also revealed that Final Fantasy IX does actually have multiplayer for the ATB battles?
I was going to mention that.
Well,
You can set certain characters to a different controller.
Yeah. You can set different characters to a different controller. I don't know if it's ever, like, actually mentioned in the game, and I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised. No, is it?
Because
Because I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if the big Moogle explained it, and I was like, I don't give a shit because I didn't like.
also, so So
Thanks, bro. You're so
apparently,
smart.
one of the mechanics of the game is that there are all these characters in the fights, and you can put the different characters in different rows, like to protect some of the squishier ones, which Greg fully didn't know about until
I fully
like
didn't know about.
2/3 into our playing,
Which,
when
like-
the guy mentioned it offhand in conversation.
But also that one I'll be like, yeah, I mean I probably skipped it because the Moogle started and I was probably like I don't
Okay,
fucking
but he
I'll
does
figure
say
it
a
out.
lot. Like there's
Yeah.
even times like so I
does suck a
streamed this
lot.
game and I like was like I'd get to like the Moogle thing and I'd just be like, that's too many words. We're gonna come back later.
He doesn't ease you into it. He just gives a big thing of like, here's every topic about the game. Do you want me to talk about any of them? And it's like, this is no.
No, please God.
No, thank you.
So I now we've both been humiliated.
Yes.
Haha.
Well, Greg thought
Mutually
the
assured
change.
destruction.
Greg thought the change command was to change characters in the fight.
Because I had
not
played
change
Persona
positions in the
5
fight.
recently, and I was like, yeah.
Not that recently.
Not that well, that was the most recent JRPG I had played, so in my head I was like, yeah, eventually I'm gonna have a party of more than 4 people, so if I want to change characters, I'll use the change commands. So I'll ignore that for now.
Alright, so moving on. As you've played this game before, obviously, as you mentioned it's your favorite. I'm going to ask a slightly different question. Was there anything in particular that stood out to you that you sort of like appreciated more this time?
So the first time
Or
I
the last
played
time you
this
played.
game, okay, so my story with Final Fantasy IX is the first Final Fantasy I ever beat. I was kind of like Greg, and where like I played it when I was younger, and I played it at a friend's house. My friend actually let me save though, so like I clearly had better friends. No,
How generous.
So I didn't have a PlayStation. I had an N64, and they had a PlayStation. So I went and I would play it over at their house. And so it took me even longer to beat because I could only play it at their house. It was the first Final Fantasy that I actually beat. And I played it about 15 some odd years ago. Because I was in high school, and so I had a very different mindset when I first played this game, and I had not played it again since. I remember it fondly, but I had not played it again since. So like my top favorite character remained the same, I guess, because I just really related with that character. And that was Vivi. I love Vivi. Vivi is best boy.
I knew Vivi's the best boy.
He is
Everybody knows.
best character in Final
We all love
Fantasy.
Vivi.
Come at me.
Oh yeah.
This is
No,
a
it's
very
okay.
brief tangent. We were in the middle, so obviously I loved V. And throughout the play, I kept, whenever he like came on, going like, "It's there, it's my little boy.
I
There he
want
is."
to see my little boy.
and-
There he is.
And midway,
I would
while
like
we
to
were
see the
playing,
child.
while we were in the middle of playing, one of my good friends from college texted me because he had just had a baby. And like there he texted me a picture of his newborn child and was like, "This is our new baby. He's the perfect little boy." And I was just sitting there like, that's what I've been saying about BB Final Fantasy through this entire game.
You're not wrong though.
It's factually accurate.
I still love the
Yeah.
characters a lot, and I think the things that really kind of hit me differently the second time around, especially now that I'm older, is number one, my appreciation for Steiner. Number two, Kuja's reveal definitely hit me a lot
Yes.
different,
Oh, yeah.
especially after
Kuja's
having
so
already
good.
experienced Kuja's reveal
Yeah.
the first time. So like.
Yes.
After already knowing it and then going back and replaying it, you kind of see things you didn't see before, even if there was like 15 years in between the last time I had played it and really refreshed myself on the plot. It's you like I started playing through it again and I was like, oh, and then like of course like Kuja's reveal just hits you so differently, and it's like, oh.
Yes.
Oh, it's
The
very
real bad.
that cascade of shit. Like, so yeah, I love it. It's good. The whole time, just like I was replaying it, number one VV, and then of course like afterward I'm just like, oh, Steiner. Himbo extreme. Love that man.
Himbo
Love him.
the max.
He's just doing his Kanye best, okay? Like he really
certainly is.
But yeah, I do think that like that was one of the biggest things replaying through it was my appreciation for Steiner, because especially like as a dumb like 16-year-old, you have a very Zidane outlook on life.
Yes.
You're a dumb 15, 16-year-old, and you're just like, what is this dude's problem? Come on, Rusty, get it together. And then like you're replaying it now that like you're in your 30s, and you're like, this dude's just doing his job. Like, he's trying his best. He is thrust into some...
He has been given a shit sandwich.
He is. He's like holding his nose and still eating it. Like, it's just like, I'm gonna make it through. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna finish it. This is what, and he's thrust into something he doesn't really understand. He's trying to be an adult, and he doesn't really know how to adult. And I'm like, same dude. But also, it's like, this is kind of a big deal, and it's when you've spent the majority of your time as the captain just kind of standing around and telling people to go stand around, but in different places, like, this is kind of a new thing. And also, your job's on the line if you don't bring the princess back, so of course you're gonna be kind of like, oh shit, like, so...
Also, in general, like, I'm gonna not take shit from this teen boy who keeps calling me.
Honestly!
That's the thing that I mostly appreciate now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not quite 30 yet, the back half of my 20s, but, like, I am like, man, if a 16-year-old kept on mouthing off to me like this, I'd smack him. Like...
Right?
Fuck them kids.
Like, that was one of the biggest things also, is I was just like, as I'm reading the dialogue, I'm just sitting there and I'm like... Whoever wrote this game had teenagers. Like, the writer of this game had teenagers, because the dialogue for Zidane is so stupid 16-year-old. It's like, I'm sitting here and I'm just like, this was me. Like, this was me when I was first playing this game. I was the stupid 16-year-old. I was really, I just headstrong, dumb, thought I owned the world. Had boobs on the brain.
Yeah.
Like,
and he's just saying everything with like a shit-eating grin too. That you just want to like...
Absolutely.
Yeah, oh my god.
Yeah. And that's me. That was me. I was Zidane. And I think that's also like why I liked Zidane. And I still think he's a great main character, but it's still one of those things where it's like, I appreciate Steiner so much more now that I'm older. I just really appreciate him.
Have to cut you off. One, because I want someone to tag Faustian Nonsense with a redraw of that One Punch Man panel, just like, what's with this sassy lost child?
Yes, please.
Steiner and Zidane. Please. I beg of you. 2, Tony, was there anything different that you got playing through the game this time?
Yeah. Also, there's going to be a question later, particularly about characters, too. So I would like to revisit that then later with as we particularly talk about characters and identifying with them, too. So, as I said, like kind of at various moments of my life, I kind of see myself in some of the characters. And I guess I'll probably go into that a bit more once we get to that question with like how I've identified with those characters over the years. But I just every single time I play this game, just enjoying the soundtrack. Like it's still like every probably once a week I put on the Final Fantasy IX soundtrack while I'm working because it's just so relaxing. It's very nostalgic. And the game holds up like super well. And I played it on the Switch version. Normally I always play on the PS1 version. But having like some of the extra, having some of those extra like utility features that they have on the newer versions where you can speed it up and like things like that,
Turbo mode.
Honestly made the experience a lot better in a lot of ways, because like if I needed to go back, it like I was following a guide this whole time. So, and that's something that was different this time too. It's like, I'm going to play this game with the guide because I've beaten it by myself like a dozen times, but I was like, I'm going to do it with the guide so I can find everything. And there's so much I didn't realize I had missed. Extra ATEs, which are active time events, so they're like little cutscenes you can go back and forth between.
Vignettes.
Yeah, and there's so many extra ones that you have to satisfy certain circumstances to get them to actually prompt. And then when you do, you get like extra stories or like side characters you haven't seen. There's a lot of goofy ones with Quinna that you actually have to find because Quinna likes to separate from the party. And then, and then they're off on their own misadventures of like dudes getting in trouble. And it's so fun. So I'd say like playing with a guide allowed me to kind of experience parts of the game that I didn't know. It was also fun to just like know what bosses to steal from. That way you have like really strong gear and you feel really overpowered from the beginning. And all those extra features, being able to go back to an area and I had to fight 87 things along the way was really nice. Like, I just want to go back to freaking Trino to go get my Salazio coins. I don't want to fight level 10 things every 5 feet. It's nice that you can just turn off like hostile monsters and just run around the overworld without worrying about like getting into a fight. So I enjoyed that, and I think it'll probably be hard to go back to like the PS1 version, though stylistically it's really hard looking at Final Fantasy IX because it still has like really janky like pixelated backgrounds, but the character models are updated, so it's like this weird. Like the PS1 version is so beautiful in its own right.
It updates the
yeah, the Maguri mod. That's right. Yeah. There's a mod that makes Final Fantasy IX just gorgeous for the PC. But the PS1 is so like because it's all like the same fidelity and everything is like very cohesive stylistically. And it's very disjointed on the like Switch version or the PC version because it's like super smooth characters and like pixelated backgrounds. And it's just like it looks kind of weird to me. But so I thoroughly enjoyed my return to 9, and I had a great time.
9 was not the first Final Fantasy that I had played and finished. That honor goes to Final Fantasy IV, which is I still look upon fondly, but it's got its problems.
5 characters in one battle is too much.
9, however, is my favorite Final Fantasies. I'm not counting 14 because 14 is its own separate beast. But my top 3 Final Fantasies are just like a constantly shifting triangle of like which one is my favorite at any given point, and that's 9, 12, and 5. At any given point, it is one of those 3 is my favorite, and it's just ever changing. But they're all about like on par for different reasons. I adore Final Fantasy IX. This time, I did something a little stupid, and so for Steiner's ultimate weapon, as we've already discussed Steiner, it's called Excalibur 2. The only way to get it is by making your way to a very specific dungeon in under 12 hours of in-game playtime. So I tried to speedrun this game, and I do not advise this. It's still Final Fantasy IX, and I still love it, and I still love the characters, and you still get like a lot of the cutscenes, because I tried to also keep watching the all of the FMVs and everything and that, but cutting out a lot of the fat and trying to just like go right for this one part, and basically like skipping a lot of the part that I enjoyed about the game, which is all of the side content and all of the little extra bits of characterization and adventures and exploration, honestly harmed my enjoyment overall. So while it's interesting to do and it was interesting to attempt, it is not something I would advise anyone doing unless you want to do it basically like to say that you've done it. And unfortunately, it is necessary for the Platinum trophy if you're playing this on like PS4 or Steam.
It's a real gamer move to speedrun FF9.
It's a real gamer TM move. I tried to be a pro gamer, and it was
mixed reviews.
I have mixed feelings about it.
Mixed feelings about being a gamer. Sounds about right.
Yeah,
that's. Sorry for being a gamer, everybody.
Sorry for gaming.
Some crimes cannot be forgiven.
But this was not how I enjoy Final Fantasy IX, and it is a game that I truly love and adore. How I started my friendship with Tony was literally talking about Final Fantasy over Twitter.
Accepted person.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's amazing. Final Fantasy IX has led us to this exact moment right now when you think about it.
It brings us
crazy.
together. here we are, like almost a decade later.
Raise your hand
Jesus
if you
Christ.
met Tony through Final Fantasy.
Oh God, you.
I mean, Greg and I met Tony through Guy, so by extension, technically we also met Tony through Final Fantasy.
There we go.
Our boy Vivi, the power he holds.
Yes!
Best boy.
My little boy. My perfect little boy.
6 degrees of Final Fantasy. Jesus Christ. All right.
It's like the butterfly effect.
So this is I'm going to ask this question first because it's like a quicker one to get through since it's not really one that Greg and Hannah are going to have an answer to. So Final Fantasy IX is kind of a celebration of the series up until that point. It's after 7 and 8 in particular kind of diverged from the basic like actual like fantasy formula, going more in sort of like the futuristic technological kind of side. It's still fantasy, but it's not the more traditional sword and sorcery fantasy as one would expect from the name. 9 was a little bit more of a return to form, a little bit of a celebration of everything up until that point. Is there anything that you noticed from the previous games or like recurring themes that you were able to sort of pick up on this time that you enjoyed? And let's start with
before you answer this question, I just want to say I have a weird Kill Bill Sirens reaction to it was a celebration of all that came before it. Just from the sheer number of times Greg turned to me and said that exact phrase during the playthrough. It happened like at least twice every time we played. I was like, yeah, I know.
We're recording this. I mean, you guys are getting audio because it's a podcast. It's in nature, but we're recording this with webcams on. So as I was talking this over, I did see Hannah have like that kind of 1,000-yard stare for a little. So you're welcome, listeners. Sorry, but let's start with you, Az. Was there anything sort of like having played other Final Fantasies in the time since that you sort of kind of appreciated and picked up on this time through?
The most recent Final Fantasies, again, that I have played, I played through Final Fantasy VII Remake very recently, and then I have been playing Final Fantasy XIV. That has kind of been my pandemic MMO alongside Guild Wars 2. But it's Final Fantasy XIV is also definitely one of those love stories to all Final Fantasies.
Yes.
But it also allows me to kind of refresh on a bunch of those Final Fantasies too. And while I was playing through 9, I was picking up, I was like, wow, this is where I had forgotten about this, and it comes back to play into Final Fantasy XIV. But also just like one of the major things that kind of stood out to me was character designs is definitely one thing that definitely stood out to me. Because I'm going to just take, number one, because they are very fresh in my mind, and even though I love, like, Amano works, and Amano has a very distinct style, though Amano, I don't think was the actual character designer, but was one of the illustrators for 9. Who was the actual character designer? I should actually look that up. But, I mean, just when you take I'm also kind of thinking Cecil, Final Fantasy IV. I'm thinking of Cecil as well. This kind of, even though Cecil was a protagonist, but the Black Knight Cecil as well as regular Paladin Cecil. Character design of this, if I'm going to mostly compare Final Fantasy VII and 9 right now, is this, your antagonist is this ethereally beautiful person who is having this
very
kind
unearthly,
of, kind of very
fae almost.
Yes, very unearthly. Like the she of the fae, you know. And they're both having this kind of like, I don't want to say existential crisis.
No,
but they kind of are. They are both having this kind of existential crisis that's kind of culminating into this head where, like, on one hand, like, there's that moral ambiguity between these two villains. I mean, of course, in my opinion, makes a really good villain in general, is that moral ambiguity where you're kind of like, cool motive, but still murder.
Yep.
You know, like, so you kind of see where they're coming from, and they're very relatable in that. But both Sephiroth and Kuja kind of have this similarity in of themselves. Number 1, in their appearance. Number 2, in their motives. Number 3, in how they handle those motives. And so you can kind of see those, the similarities, because I'm just saying, because like those are both like really fresh on my mind since I did play Remake, even though Remake is very different in some ways than the original Final Fantasy VII. I did refresh myself on the original Final Fantasy VII after playing the remake, so they're the freshest. So it's like that alone, I think, was one of the big things. And then, of course, just when you, from the graphics standpoint, because I played on PC, it's a little more updated. You can see a lot of the inspiration that they took from prior games, both of how they are blending that fantasy and steampunk element into one, even in just the design of the world itself. They're taking this kind of more futuristic thing from 7. They're pulling from some of the earlier, more fantasy-based Final Fantasy games. They're merging them together in a more cohesive world in Final Fantasy IX. And I really appreciated that. It really kind of gave this new, fresh feeling to it, where you are like blending this almost like technological steampunk type of deal in with a more medieval, traditional fantasy-based setting, and it gets a very fresh take of a fantasy setting, and I really appreciated that too.
Tony, this is a little bit of a weird one since this is your question.
Yeah.
But yeah, was there anything that you kind of, this time going through it, that you picked up on that's just like, oh, I recognize this from other Final Fantasy?
So in 7 and 8 specifically, Moogles were more like media items, especially in 7. Like they were just like mascots. They weren't like real tangible creatures like they were in previous titles. And so the Moogles play a pretty big part of 9. There's a whole mail system where like there's secret letters, you can go back and like you get rewards for all that. Oh yeah. Yeah. And then there's Slitskin, and you can support Slitskin with, by buying all his things, and then, always buy, his whatever items he has to offer, because he travels all around the world with you. And I enjoy that the Moogles were like a very real thing. But more so than that, just like the return of like very kind of traditional monsters, flans and goblins and all these other like original creatures from the Final Fantasy world. 7's monsters are fucking wild. And they're like, there's like the Hell House. It's literally a goddamn house with legs, and then there's a head that comes out of it, and it's like there's motorcycles with sickles, and like they took the technological world and made the monsters just like absolutely insane. Which is fun, and it makes like 7 feel like more goofy and campy that way. But it is kind of nice that while playing 9, it's like, oh yeah, these are like, very traditional dragons and, all these other, creatures. Like Cactuar were even in 7, but like it felt so weird in 7 that you'd have traditional monsters and then literally a house.
You'd have like the traditional stuff and then like brain pod.
Like weird, like biological experiment zombies and stuff like that. But 9 felt just very fantasy through and through, which I really, really, really liked to return to, because I like high fantasy a lot. That's something I've always been like. If I had to choose between sci-fi and fantasy, I've always been a fantasy guy. And there's some sci-fi elements in 7 that I appreciate, but like more you get, towards that sci-fi, the less I'm in. So. And the music as well felt very traditional fantasy. It felt very 7 and 8 had a lot of rock and guitar, you know what I mean? It's very like rock influence a lot of the time, especially the battle themes. The battle theme itself, the that is actually in every single Final Fantasy game up until 7. The battle theme has that bass line. So even in the combat, you felt like this kind of nostalgicness from just that baseline, that return to form. And yeah, it's kind of nice that you get all these elements again. And kind of the traditional classes return as well, where black mages and red mages, white mages, knights, thieves, assassins,
dragoons.
Yeah, like all these Oh, Dragoon's so good. Freya is so good.
Class,
and I love
class.
how they incorporated the Dragoons, because normally they have like all this really cool like metallic armor and all this nonsense. They really, it's just like she had this cool ass spear. Though one thing that's really interesting about a lot of the transforms is it's like they then hail back to more of like the traditional designs for those. So like Freya looks a bit more like a traditional Dragoon when she can trance. Vivi, his hat gets all pointy to be like his hat's like as tall as him, and things like that. And Zidane's is actually a really big spoiler for later. Zidane's transform and his.
We'll get to that.
Zidane looks like Super Saiyan 4 Goku.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get to spoilers after this question, I think.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, there's just like a lot of really cool things that they hail back to while still feeling like very distinct. 9 feels very distinct while having so many like love letters to the previous games. So it's cool. I like.
Yeah. So I'm going to change this up a little bit for Greg and Hannah, as they haven't experienced much of the other Final Fantasies, but in 9 being a celebration of the other Final Fantasies, I would also argue that it's kind of a celebration of the fantasy genre in general. Was there any little aspects that you guys kind of picked up on and appreciated in your playthrough? Whichever one of you guys wants to jump in first.
So I have some limited experience with Final Fantasy. I had played through Final Fantasy Adventure, which is not the first Final Fantasy. I'd played that one all the way through. And then I had also played somewhere along the way some remake of like Final Fantasy 1, because I never finished it, but I was into 8-Bit Theater, that webcomic that used the Final Fantasy sprites. So I remember even as a kid, and also now, it's like now I appreciate that it had maybe gone out of style for a bit, but like Vivi and the Black Mage's looks, harkening back to that just like yellow hat, blue robes, dark face with yellow eyes. But as far as like also just in the more fantasy sense, where we stopped playing, where we got up to was the dwarf place, which was like caught me off guard, because I had been like, wow, I don't normally associate dwarves with Final Fantasy. Like they're speaking in Scots dialect and shit, and I'm just like, okay, this is weird. And then I did sort of look up like dwarves in Final Fantasy, and I was like, oh, they're all from like before 7, and then they sort of show up in 14, but not really. So I was like, okay, so this was like dwarves are like a fantasy staple, but not really a Final Fantasy anymore, staple. So it was kind of cool to see how they did it. Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think in a lot of ways the FF9 fits a very classical fantasy set of tropes. We got a hero who is running around trying to help a princess on a quest. We've got a knight. We've got a mage. I think setup of our party is very classic fantasy, even like outside of video games, like my experience from books and movies and
or even
TV.
D&D, yeah.
They're a D&D group.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
they're a D&D group.
They are
yeah.
a D&D
They
party.
Which, I imagine it's a game, so that makes sense. It's a very typical fantasy narrative, I think. I think in terms of a celebration of fantasy tropes in general, probably the first thing that comes to mind is just the way that it's structured, with all of these different places that you can visit, all of which have pretty different vibes. It does feel kind of like we're jumping from like one fantasy setting, one sort of classical set of tropes to another, which I did think was really fun. Sort of the way the world felt cohesive, but it also, there was like a lot going on and a lot of different
there's a lot disparate, but
settings
that felt
all of which were very
unified.
interesting.
Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know if I would call it a celebration of fantasy in general so much as a
That's
fantasy. personally. I think that's just kind of what it is.
Which after 7 and 8 was a big deal.
Yeah.
For Final Fantasy, it seems.
Right on.
But yeah.
Now, we're from this point on, we getting into spoilers. So, if you want to play Final Fantasy 9 for yourself, which I recommend, maybe not in the way that I did it.
No speedruns.
Don't
don't speed run. Take your time.
Enjoy it.
Don't
really
be a gamer.
appreciate Vivi.
Really appreciate Vivi. Just, we love the boy. Respect the boy.
He's a good little boy.
If you want to play for yourself, feel free to do so. It is Final Fantasy 9 is available on just pretty much throw a dart. It's available on that system. Pretty much.
I think it's even on Xbox One now. 7, 8, 9, I think, are all on Xbox, which is even more wild.
Enjoy it. Appreciate it. Play it on the original PlayStation if you want. Who knows? We're getting into spoilers. So I'm going to mix this one with one of our standard arrays. And we've got 3 basic standard questions that I like to ask for disk space. They're a little bit trite, they're a little bit basic, they kind of apply to every game, but I like to ask them because, honestly, I like hearing the answers. So, were there any particular characters or moments that really stood out to you and just sort of like stuck with you? And yeah, could just go into a little bit of detail on that. I'm going to start with, let's start with Tony, actually. For this playthrough, like, who stuck out to you, and was there any sort of big moment with them? Or just like a big moment in general?
So as I said at the beginning, kind of like at various points of my life, I saw myself in a lot of these characters. I'm possibly going to get emotional during this, so just a fair warning.
Totally reasonable.
So
don't feel like you need to share any more than you have.
No, it's all good. So my grandmother gave me this game before she died. And I grew up like watching her play it. And then she'd moved away, and before she moved away, she gave it to me, and she'd passed away later. So already this game had like sentimental value. Growing up, I think like high school Tony, very much like what Azrael said, Zidane was kind of like someone I kind of saw myself in, right? Girl crazy, always kind of tried to be the cool guy. And I think in a lot of ways, Zidane doesn't like himself, therefore try to be the cool guy to convince others he's cool, because then maybe he would actually feel cool. Like, that's the vibe I've always gotten from Zidane, is he's actually just a sad boy. And that's something that it goes into later, is like... Yeah,
you don't get that until Zidane, like late disc 2, like early disc 3. It's a while.
Like, Zidane is not really the cool, suave guy that he, kind of makes himself out to be. So... in a lot of ways, like, I saw that in myself because I was always trying to fit in, and I never felt like I really did, because I was always trying to, like, be who other people wanted me to be, because I thought that would make them like me more. So that was high school Tony. And then I was a lot different in high school than I was when I went to college, and I actually met people and learned a lot about people and societies and culture, genders and sexualities and all these other things. I was a very, very enclosed, very ignorant worldview. And it wasn't until I went to college and met people that I realized a lot of what I thought about the world was completely wrong, and in a lot of ways really messed up. And I can see that in Steiner. Steiner's entire world is this blind loyalty to my queen would never do anything wrong. She is the best person ever, and in a lot of ways, it's like you grow up around people that, and like when you have like parents that you're like, oh, my parents love me. They would never steer me the wrong direction. They would never teach me things that are harmful or anything like that. But then you realize, maybe these aren't the great, amazing, wonderful human beings I thought they were my entire life. At least not in
people are people.
People are people. And and it's like every time I play this game, I've like noticed that about a character, is that there's something that I've identified with them. So Zidane was kind of captured how I felt in high school. Steiner kind of reflected, like, he eventually had to change and admit when he was wrong. And for me, that was like a big thing, is I had to fully admit to myself, like, wow, yeah, I don't really like the person I was, and I want to be a better person. And then for Vivi himself is this like sense of existential crisis. Like, I was put on this world and I don't know why, and I don't know what to do with that. And there's been times in my life that I felt that way too. Before coming to FN, I was at a job that was going nowhere fast, and I didn't know where else to go and what else to do with it. And Vivi's kind of like outlook of, well, I still don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to do my goddamn best, is really endearing to me. And I always kind of like really appreciated that. And then also, I guess, to finish up how I've reflected on the main cast, Garnet, her kind of big thing is no matter how much I think I can do it, it always like, I feel like I'm always fucking it up and I can never fix what I want to. I'm never strong enough to get done what needs to get done and save my people, save my kingdom and things like that. And like, I get that. It's like that lack of confidence to really fully get done everything you wish to do, or doing it in a way that you're proud of and happy with. And that's something I've like felt like I've struggled with in the past too. So it's kind of just different aspects of my life I've seen in all these characters, and it's nice to self-reflect with them and have a nice existential crisis at 2 a.m. after playing the game. That totally didn't happen last week, I promise.
I feel like that is the theme of this game. It's just like Final Fantasy IX is existential crisis the game, and Vivi is existential crisis the character.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not incorrect.
Absolutely.
We'll get to that maybe in a little bit, but thank you for sharing, first of all, but it's always a hard question to answer of like, how much is enough? And that question definitely varies, and the answer certainly varies and depends on like where you are and how you feel. Do you have anything more to add, or should I move on?
All right. No, I don't think so. I think that pretty much covers how I've been feeling.
Thank you for sharing. That was big. Final Fantasy IX is good. It's good characters. I'm just gonna go from left to right on my screen. And Greg, was there any particular character or particular moment, or particular moment with a character that just kind of stuck with you?
So the character / moment that really stuck with me was a very minor character, but something that specifically I think the effect that it had on me could only happen because this was a PlayStation 1 game. So Black Waltz 3. Yes. There is a running thing where the perfect boy we talk about, Vivi, he's a black mage. And they are like engineered organisms. And there's like a lot of dumb black mages, like unaware black mages, that are just sort of like automatons. But there are specialized ones that sort of track you down, called like the Black Waltzes. There's like Black Waltz 1, and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna kill you." And it's like, "Whoa, you can talk." And Zidane, you fight by yourself with Zidane or whatever, and then Zidane is like, "I just won't talk about that weird thing." And then Black Waltz 2 shows up, and he's like, "Hey," and Zidane's like, "Oh, like the other one." And everyone's like, "The other one?" But you deal with that one. Black Waltz 3 is the final of these specialized black mages, and you face him on this like ship that's crewed by a bunch of the dumber automaton black mages, and Vivi, who's also a black mage but a perfect little boy and like intelligent, about as intelligent as if not more. He's more of a person than the Black Waltz. That's what I'm getting to. He like shows up and he's like, "Hey, why are you being so mean? Like, come on!" And the automaton black mages are like they move to shield Vivi from this bad guy, and he's like, "Huh, you think he's like, you can try to reason with me? I'm not a weenie like these idiot black mage soldiers." So he like torches the lot of them in a cutscene. Vivi gets a lot of trauma from this. But the thing is, I'm not focused on Vivi here. I'm focused on Black Waltz 3 itself, because you fight him then. And he's going like off the wall. And then later on, you defeat him and you knock him off. And then he's got wings and he lands on another airship that some other people are flying. It's a big thing. And he lands on the airship and he starts to strike like his crazy pose, and a big text box appears over him as he does to move, because this is a game that doesn't have voice acting like at all. And he says, "I exist only to kill. I exist only to kill. I exist only," and it keeps repeating. And then once I hit A, to end it, the dramatic pose he was striking was like a hand covered over his face and like shoulders heaving as if he were like crying or sobbing. And I was like, oh, sick, you're having a crisis right now. Like, and that sort of reveal could only happen, like, if there were voice acting, I'd get from the actor, I'm sure, like, that full breakdown. But here it was like I had to watch the text go, I exist only to kill, and be like, oh, that's badass, I exist only to kill. Oh, he said it again. Oh, he's saying this a lot. And then bam, the reveal of like, ah! And then later on, you beat him in a cutscene, and you fight him once more, like one last time, and he's like survived this airship crash, and he's like all fucked up, like he's just moving forward because he only exists to kill, and he can like barely get sentences out. And so yeah, Black Waltz 3 has stuck with me. He's relatively early in the game, but I like him.
I love that.
But I mean, I feel like that says something about the character's impact in general, just because he is a minor character and there was this major, like, it was a very major point to you.
Yes.
You know, like, and it did a good job of expressing that point and what his point was. And
that was the thing that really got me, was just the text box in particular, and the animation was like, oh, okay, this could only happen on a PS1 game that like didn't have room for full voice acting.
It's a very excellent foil to both, I would say, Steiner and Vivi, in that, like, they're set in their ways, they're set on their path, and whether they want to or not, whether they think it is the right thing to do, it's what they're sticking to. And I will circle back to that shortly, but...
Yeah, no, it was like it was really cool to like see as like the game goes on, like he does have a lot in common, because he opens up mockingly like, yeah, I can think, idiot, and Vivi's like, why would you hurt people if you could think? And then he's like,
oh god, why would I hurt people if I can think?
Oh, because the only reason I'm allowed to think is to kill.
Yep.
Oh no, I can't think. I'm just like these guys. Fuck.
All right, Hannah. Is there any particular moment or any particular character or any particular character moment?
Yeah. So obviously Vivi is my perfect little boy. He's my perfect little boy. I love him. He's so tiny and good. But I think the moment that stuck with me most from the gameplay is actually a Garnet moment. So when I watch things or consume things in general, half of my brain is usually focused on how that thing is going, like the actual content, and the other half of my brain is always like, okay, how are you writing your women? Is this going to be weirdly misogynistic? Especially when I consume anything made before like 2015. Final Fantasy IX, I think, in that regard, is neither the best nor the worst thing that I have ever seen. And I think Garnet is an interesting case study in how women are written in, that time period. Because she's a character. Like, she has a personality, she has an inner life, she has wants and goals, and she's like there's stuff going on, which is, not a particularly high bar, but a bar that in 2000 often very much did not get cleared with women, and it made her very pleasant to watch, and she was fun, but the thing that made me, a little bit annoyed about Garnet and the way she was written is that she, most of the time, didn't get to, have an impact on the plot. There's one of the many, tests, rules of thumb that came out in, the early 2000s.
Oh, here we go.
For evaluating how well this work writes women. And my personal favorite is the sexy lamp test, which is, could you, if you replaced this female character with a sexy lamp that, like, a lot of people wanted to possess, would the plot change? I feel like in the vast majority of cases, you absolutely could replace Garnet with a sexy lamp that a lot of people wanted to possess and the plot would not change, because, like, she does have goals and she does make decisions, but those goals and decisions, the vast majority of the time, are kind of like, I just want to do what everyone else wants to do anyway. And a lot of the plot is predicated on, we need to physically get Garnet so we can get these things that she has inside of her, or, like, it's Zidane going, like, we need to rescue Garnet. Like, she is, at many points in time, kind of a MacGuffin.
Yes.
And so the plot moment that stuck with me is, I think, in the half of a game we played, and this might change later on in the game, however, I would argue that half a game is a really long time. But in the half of the game that we played, I think the big moment where that isn't true, where Garnet does get to, like, affect, she has real actual agency and she gets to move the plot, is the gang is in Lindblom, and I believe they're going to Bermesia next, and Cloud
It's gonna happen.
and and Zidane is like, hey, Knife. Oh, sorry. We named her Knife. That requires explanation. After a certain point, Garnet is like, they're like going around among the common people, and Zidane is like, Garnet, we need something to call you other than Garnet. And she gives this big speech about, like, what's that thing called? The sharp pointy thing? Yes, a dagger. And everyone's talking about daggers, and then it's like, name her. And obviously the preset name is Dagger. And Greg and I were like, let's name her Knife. So Knife/Dagger/Garnet. Zidane is like, I think you should stay here, you know? It's too dangerous for you. And Steiner is also like, yes, princess, I also think it's too dangerous for you. And besides, you need to get to Alexandria. And Garnet is like, I want to come, though. And everyone's like, no, it's fine, you don't have to come. And the gang all sets out to dinner, and she, like, slips sleeping drugs in everybody's dinner but hers and Steiner's, and she's like, Steiner, we're going to Alexandria now, or we're going wherever we're going now. And Steiner's like, I thought we decided that we weren't doing that. And she's like, no, I've decided that I'm doing that, and you can either come or not come, but I'm going. And then the party from there is split for a little while, and Garnet and Steiner go off and do their own thing. They, like, run into Marcus and the boss man of Zidane's thief group. And it's fun. And it's the only, like, it's a nice character moment of Garnet. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if I would call it, like, a big culminating moment for her character or not, because Garnet in the first half of the game, like, doesn't change that much. From the beginning, she is, like,
she pretty much knows
fairly
her deal.
Yeah, she knows what she's doing. But it is this moment of everyone else kind of treating her, you know, as a MacGuffin, as a thing to be protected, and her being like, we're not doing that, actually. Which I think it's just a nice moment in the meta sense of, like, by the way, I am a character. The writers aren't gonna write me like one for most of the game, but yeah. I am.
We do take those.
And we take those.
We take those.
There's a couple of moments later on, particularly after the death of the queen, where Garnet takes the throne, and in particular the big moment with Alexander, which is one of my favorite moments in the entire series. You guys have not gotten that part. Basically, Kuja, the main villains, come to destroy Alexandria, And
to sluttily destroy Alexander.
He's come to be
to
a
do villain things.
Oh,
In
so
his
hot,
manties and thigh highs.
No, I need to talk briefly about how slutty
he is
Kuja
No,
is.
Oh, yeah.
Kuja is
I
the most.
love it.
This is the point in Final Fantasy IX's favor in my feminist analysis of Final Fantasy IX. They do definitely sexualize their women. They very lovingly model the butts of all the hot ladies. However, Kuja is the sluttiest dressed character
By
in Final
far.
Fantasy IX, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
That is a win for feminism.
Hannah and I, we're voicing the game. Hannah's doing like this breathy, overly sexy voice for Beatrix, and then Kuja shows up.
Beatrix, and you can't win.
And then so Kuja shows up with like cum gutters and hip dips, and it's like, what's up? And it's like, oh, Beatrix gets pants, Kuja gets a jacket.
That was a very fun scene because Greg was being Kuja and I was being Beatrix, and they were talking to each other, and we were like, just
I'm here to help Queen Bride.
are you? Like, just kind of weird, sexy voice to sexy voice
amazing.
combat.
The voice for Kuja for me will always be either Zarbon from Dragon Ball Z or Pegasus from
Jen.
Yu-Gi-Oh! And you cannot give me them any other voices. It won't fit. Kuja is absolutely Zarbon or Pegasus, and I love it.
We're gonna get to Kuja in a second.
Yes, but sorry,
But-
I interrupted.
Totally fine. Let's actually move on to Az. Az, for this playthrough, was there any particular character? Well, we already went over Steiner.
Yeah.
So I'll ask, was there any particular moment that kind of just like really stuck out to you this time? It's just like been chewing on since.
I'm still kind of only like halfway through my own playthrough, my second playthrough, but I have played it before, so there's a couple things that I do remember. One of those things that I really remember, I guess I'm gonna, because of the fact that so many, I guess, of my emotional things, either number one, have already been touched on. Number two, are big spoilers, and I don't want to take away so many things.
I'm going to spoil the ending just like
Craig
straight
and
up.
Hannah, who have not
Full
gotten.
stop.
I don't care.
But
Go for it.
I don't know, like the first time, especially on the PS1, like when you're playing that thing and that whole moment with Alexander and Bahamut.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that was really good. It's in like my little teenage brain. It's like back in the 2000s with our polygons. I'm just like, whoa. But I also just kind of have to like say that like even just going back and playing it, I'm going to talk more, I guess, from a more technical standpoint, is just how beautiful the game actually is even today. It is now the year 2022. This game is 22 years old.
This game can drink.
It is.
in the United
It
States.
is not in. Yeah, it's legal. It can vote. It can drink. Like this game has probably graduated college. Like this game is it. It's an older game as far as like games are concerned because of how rapidly technology, especially since this game was created, has advanced. I mean, we're already on PlayStation 5. Not 5, 4. Right?
5?
Is it the 5?
No,
It's
we're
PlayStation
on
5. It is the
PlayStation
5.
5. You can't buy it anywhere because people scalp
Yeah, I mean,
it.
you can't get it, but we're already
We are
on the PlayStation
conceptually
5.
on 5.
This game came out on the PlayStation 1. So there have been 5 generations of consoles. And like, of course, like we're so inundated with like hyper realistic graphics now. Like if it doesn't look like it can reach out of the screen and touch you, it's not good graphics type of deal. And while yes, I played the kind of updated version on PC, I'm not running any mods. I'm playing it its bare bones. It has only been kind of bare bones remastered on the Steam version, which is the version that I played. It is as close to its raw form as you can get without actually playing it on the PS1. And I'm just still blown away by some of the cinematics, like some of the panning views of like when you're going to the different cities, like when you first start in Alexandria and when the ship there's that cut scene where they're escaping with Garnet, and Brane is blowing up the city, and it is still just like, holy crap, like this is beautiful, actually. Like you're getting these wide panning shots of the city. You're seeing the explosions of the ship just running into the different buildings. And then, of course, like when you go to Lindblom, again, these wide panning shots of this beautiful scenery. And you're just sitting there and you can see all the love and the detail that was put into this game. Even for like, because I mean, it's a PS1 game, so of course its development team is nowhere near as extensive as they are now. They're working with still pretty dated technology at this point. I think we were getting into the cusp of the PS2 around this time. So it's just, there was so much, you could tell the dedication and heart and love that was put into this, even just from an art design standpoint. And I still think it's kind of funny where like you can still kind of see like main character syndrome through like when it comes to like design, because like I'm even like watching it, and I think I even made a comment on it while I was streaming. I was like, I like how Zidane is so like, he's high def. It's like when you have the 1080p webcam, but your buddy is still in 460. Like when you guys are like in the Zoom call, like, and so like with the NPC, so you have this lovingly rendered Zidane, and then he's talking to this NPC that you can barely just make out their eyes and mouth, and it's like, I wonder who the main character in this situation is. It's so funny, and I love it. But I think, honestly, without touching too much on a lot of those, because like I haven't gotten to it yet, but in my mind, again, but in my mind, that number one, that the impact of that scene with Alexander and Bahamut, I have the feeling, just because of how, I mean, still breathtaking that some of these cinematics are, like, now, even in this 20 years in the future, 5 generations of graphics updates and console updates, that scene is still gonna probably be just as powerful, and I'm really looking forward to experiencing that again, with that same kind of almost like teenage like wonder of, whoa, badass, like, you know. So I don't know, I also kind of just appreciated the fact that it wasn't voice acted. You could kind of give your own intonation to things. You could kind of project your own feelings that you're feeling in that situation as things are being revealed, to how the characters might do that. It felt it was kind of like reading a book to me, like, of course, like visually, but like you're immersing yourself in this world. You're giving these characters their own voices in your head. You're not having to really rely on someone else's portrayal of the character. You're able to implement your own, so it in my opinion, allowed you to kind of relate to those characters more, which also, like, I love these characters. I found myself, even in my first playthrough, even before my huge older, more reflective self associating with Steiner a little bit more, I found myself relating to him in some ways, like, and even when I was younger, but even still now, like, you find yourself relating to these characters because they're so human. And because of the main theme of the game, you can find something in each of them, including Kuja, that you relate with. Like, we're all kind of afraid of our own mortality, and, you know, and what that, and I think that whole thing kind of speaks to me a little bit more, as, like, I'm gonna touch a little bit personal, like Tony did. I'm a suicide survivor, so it's kind of like, what is that impact of your mortality going to leave, not only on you but in your wake? How's it going to affect everything around you, and like being afraid of facing that mortality? And also, like with Vivi, is like learning to love the life that you have. And then, like with Steiner, it's just kind of like, again, admitting when you're wrong and learning to see the world through different eyes. And then with Zidane is finding that confidence again, that actual confidence in yourself, and being yourself and not being who everybody else wants you to be. And then like with Garnet, just finding it in yourself to be able to contribute to the world around you and the people that you love in a way that's meaningful. And I feel the characters themselves are very relatable. And I think that really helps immerse you into the world, especially like when it's not voice acted. You can kind of apply that to
it's a fancy visual novel.
It's a fancy visual novel, and you can apply it, your own perceptions to it, your own, what's the word that I'm looking for? Words are hard.
Experiences.
Your own experiences and your own perspective. Yes, your own perspective. And
right on.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing as well.
I want to touch on one thing. Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IX are from the same console, and Final Fantasy VII looks like Garbo.
Yes.
Oh my god, yes.
It is
like the amount, and there was one game in between them. I think there was 5 years.
1997 was 7.
Okay, so it was. Oh my god, was it? It was only like 4 years. Holy crap!
Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
I mean, to be fair, 4 years where technology was advancing at a breakneck.
But it's crazy. It's the same console, but what they could do.
Well, it's not the technology. It's like the skill of the people.
It was the same
using
hardware
because it's the same console. So it's really just sort of a. It's if anything, it is just I think the team.
It is crazy how
far the
much
team has
better
gone.
9 looks than 7 in every way. Like 7 is rough to look at, but and it's just. It goes to show how much love they went to the game that they were able to put that much more fidelity into it in just a few years in the series. 7 is really hard to play now for that reason.
I do need to talk about the butts.
Talk about the butts. Talk about the butts before I talk about Kuja.
Let's talk about butts.
I think that the thing that I noticed most about the art in 9 is how lovingly modeled the butts were, but only for the hot ladies. Only Garnet's butt was like, okay, I'm not used to video game graphics, so to me I was like, these are barely people. Like they're just kind of weird little cartoon things, except Garnet has a fucking photorealistic butt. And so did the Alexandrian soldiers. The Alexandrian soldiers who wear these fucking leotards, because Beatrix won't give them fucking pants, I guess. And
she's the only one allowed to have pants.
She is the only one allowed to have pants. That's what's funniest about. I am partially thinking about it from a feminist perspective, but it's also just so funny to me that Beatrix has pants, and also we meet some like Alexandrian
the higher
officers.
Rank ones, it seems.
At some point, and they have pants. It's just something like
you
denied to the foot
you want
soldiers.
pants, you gotta get a promotion.
But like you can see like where the leotard comes over like half the butt. You can see like the curve. They put so much effort into the butts.
They couldn't render Kuja's butt or it would break the game, so they gave him a butt cape. They were like, "Oh man, we've already made him too powerful. He's wearing the thigh highs and the panties. We gotta give him a butt cape. He's in the bikini armor. We've gone too far. We
cannot show this man's butt. They won't let us.
Justice for Kuja's butt. Justice for Kuja's butt."
I went to remastering of Final Fantasy IX, where the only difference is I can see Kuja's butt.
There might be a
Guys,
mod.
we'll make it like really like thin gossamer and just
Final Fantasy IX.
Kuja's lovingly rendered butt under like the organza butt cape, you know?
I can't. I looked it up. I can't find any mods. I looked up. Oh gosh.
I think you're a game design major. I think you should make a mod of Final Fantasy IX where we can see Kuja's butt.
Oh, it's so different than I love modeling things.
I have things to say about that in mere moments when we get there. All right. Is it my time? Do I get to talk about Kuja?
And
my second.
Yes.
You're running the show.
My
is
second
really up to
favorite
you.
villain in the entire Final Fantasy franchise, because again, I'm keeping Final Fantasy 14 like that. That's its own thing. We're not getting there today. But Kuja is fascinating. You don't get like the full scope of like what he is and what his deal is until very, very late in the game. this is where I spoil the rest of the game for you guys, but Kuja is a psychopomp. He is there to cause destruction and take all of the souls on that world and send them to the world that he comes from, called Terra. Basically, because they're stagnating and they're dying and they don't have souls. So he is taking all of the living beings on this world, inciting wars, causing them to kill each other, and then sending their souls back home so that they can survive. Kuja is not the only character from Terra in the game. The other one is Zidane. Kuja is the prototype. He is flawed. He is going to inevitably and eventually is doomed to die. Zidane does not have this problem. Throughout the game, like, you see all these different, like, animal people, all, just, like, various shapes, sorts, different descriptions. There's only one with a monkey tail, and that's Zidane. The other one is Kuja. The reason you can't see his ass is because his tail is hidden.
That's the funniest thing I've
You
ever
had to hide
heard.
Kuja's ass for plot points.
They can't show us his butt.
They can't show his butt because it's a spoiler. You can't see his ass for story reasons.
Ass is a spoiler.
Oh my god.
It's too powerful.
You know what? Then I want this remastering. You need to give them like a different monkey trait.
Well, if they do anything like FF7 remake, it'll assume some familiarity.
That's true.
So you'll be able to see his ass early and be like, "Oh, there's the tail," but really we know what you're looking at.
So the thing with Kuja is he does his duty. He's this interesting character because he is bombastic, theatric, like clearly takes pleasure and pride in his work. You don't find out until like a little bit later that it's basically like, if I'm going to be the villain, I'm going to be spectacular at it. And he puts his absolute all and gall into being as dramatic a villain. Like, when you talk to him, and, like, he talks in various, like, theater metaphors of, like, the curtain rises, because he knows that at the end of it, he is the villain.
Really put his whole cussy into this plan.
Stop!
Thank you, Greg.
No!
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that.
No!
Are you gonna tell me I'm wrong?
Just because you're right doesn't mean you should say it.
The very end of the game is the creator of Kuja and Zidane basically comes down and is like, "All right, I'm here to collect all of the dead that you've made. Bring him back to Terra." And
what's his name? What's the villain? What's that guy's name?
His name is Garland. Because, from Final Fantasy 1.
From Final Fantasy 1! I know that one!
But basically, Kuja's like, "All right, so you're going to extend my life now, right?" And he's like, "Nah, you're going to die anyway." And Kuja takes this understandably very poorly. And
I took that personally.
It's like, yeah, no, you're still gonna die. You did good work though, but like, yeah, no, can't help you. Sorry. And I took that personally. And the finale of the game is Kuja basically like, if my life has no meaning, if I am fated to die anyway, like, I'm going to take down everyone with me. If the purpose of my existence is that I am fated to fade, then I'm going to go out with a bang. Why do I not deserve to live?
I mean, from the sound of things, because you're an asshole.
It's because he exists only to kill.
Yeah, there's a lot of little parallels.
Yeah,
there we go. With Vivi and Black Waltz 3, etc., etc. But the crew manages to, our gang basically like kind of convinces Kuja at the end of like, because they, even though like, yeah, they're all gonna die, but their life still has meaning because they give it meaning. And it just utterly baffles Kuja. That is why they fight against him. That is why he needs to be stopped. Which is especially poignant for Vivi, because Vivi does not have a long lifespan at all.
Black mages only live maybe 1 year.
And Vivi is like 8.5 months as of the start of the game.
Beautiful baby boy.
Beautiful baby boy who deserves much better than this.
They fight Kuja, and it brings in the final boss, Necron, which is the theoretical like living embodiment of that existential fear of death. It's appropriate and thematic for the game. It also comes out of fucking nowhere. It's weird.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is the actual final boss, and it's this weird giant. Necron is so weird, and it really is just out of nowhere.
Necron it's representative of the idea, but it's also like, this is very strange, even with context. It's better on paper, but Necron gets defeated, and Zidane and Kuja end up basically like everyone else in the party is safe except for Zidane and Kuja, and Zidane saves Kuja, which, you know, again, baffles him, because he has done nothing to deserve this respect, this decency. Just, he has been only terrible to Zidane and the party. He has only bought their ire, so he doesn't understand why he would be given this respect, this kind of final moment of, he thinks he deserves nothing, because he has earned nothing. But Zidane stays with him in his final moments, and as things are collapsing, Kuja basically, like, Kuja uses his final moments to save Zidane. And it's that interesting kind of come together, come to God moment of, this villain has a very real and relatable and understandable perspective and goal. It is a flawed goal. It is coming from a very dangerous place, but I like Kuja a lot, because I think in those final moments, Kuja gets it. He kind of understands the why, because he very easily could have done otherwise, but for the villain of this piece, he decided in his last moments to not be villainous, and I think that is just utterly fascinating to pick apart. Kuja's great. I just wish there was more of that ahead of, disc 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I'm with you. Like, Kuja's one of my favorite villains. I am also one of those, if anybody who knows me, I'm one of those people that, like, I tend to gravitate more toward the villain than I do the hero, if only because, to me, I feel like the villain is a little more nuanced in a lot of things. I mean, not to say that I don't like my heroes, but, like, I really thought, especially toward the end where you actually got to see Kuja's character, that he was probably by far one of the more interesting characters of the game, and a game full of already interesting characters. Yeah, and so he's really good, and it's one of those things where, like, I think I also really appreciate Kuja as a villain is, number one, because he is an example of a villain who is unapologetically a villain and doesn't make an excuse for being a villain. Like, he's bad, he knows he's bad, and he's gonna let everybody know it. But at the same time, he's more nuanced than that. And yeah, I really appreciate that
Sephiroth.
About him.
Sephiroth really, towards the end, like, it was just, he was kind of taken over by, like, grief and madness, and basically at the end, it wasn't Sephiroth. Like, that's a big thing, is, like, who's actually the villain? Is it Jenova or is it Sephiroth? That's, like, the really big thing about Final Fantasy VII is Sephiroth's not really a villain. Yes. He's just a conduit for the real villain, who is Jenova, and corporate greed and all this other things. Honestly, if you really want to know the problem with Final Fantasy VII, the real villain is Shinra.
Yes.
Objectively.
Yeah, the real villain is Shinra.
Real villain is magic fracking.
Exactly. I mean, that's pretty much it. So, like, in a way, Kuja's, like, I love Sephiroth as a villain because he's so, I mean, God, he's got the best fucking villain theme in the whole series. One Winged Angel is, like, my favorite song in all of Final Fantasy. But Kuja is so much more nuanced and interesting that way. Like, Sephiroth, you just feel bad for, but ultimately at the end, it's like Sephiroth hasn't really been around since he snapped. Sephiroth is gone. It's Jenova that's kind of taking him over. But
always Kuja.
Always had, like,
100%. Every moment of Kuja is Kuja. All of him.
And it's a very believable. Obviously, it doesn't excuse behavior,
but you can understand
it's one of those situations where it definitely
cool motive, still murder, as Azrael said.
Yeah, cool, exactly. Cool motive, still murder.
I feel like Kuja is relatable if you've ever, like, felt low enough of, like, if you've ever asked for yourself, why does it matter? You can relate to Kuja.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, again, it's because this is him. This is all him. He's unapologetic about it. And so that kind of, like, makes the end with him so much more, like, you see, I'm trying to find the words for it. Articulation.
Words are hard. Podcasting is
like,
hard.
Words are incredibly difficult. But yeah, when you see that kind of, like, culmination of just everything, of maybe it was done a little too quickly, but you kind of, again, like you said, he gets it, and it's not like a shift in personality. It's just he's growing, he's maturing, and then he dies. But it's just kind of poignant. Like one of those things where it's like, it's very poignant. So it's kind of like he and Vivi learned the same lesson in very different ways, and Kuja is not a foil to Zidane, who is the main character. Kuja is a foil to Vivi.
Kuja is a foil to, I'd say, the entire party in different aspects.
Yeah.
Whether that is, like, the nature of his purpose, to basically, like, how much to devote himself to the task that he has been given, how much confidence he can even have in that, the fact that he's going to be inevitably die and be forgotten, and what kind of purpose that he's making for himself in the here and the now. Just, Kuja he's a perfect villain because he is a dark reflection of the entire party and the entire game up until basically that point, and is a fascinating case study, and gets even weirder and more interesting in some of the crossover games later on, like with the.
Do you want to talk
with
about the
Dissidia
crossover games? Because it just made things weird.
I'm gonna mention it. I'm gonna mention it a little bit briefly with the second Dissidia, which is chronologically the first. Kuja has kind of learned the lesson, and basically, like, everyone is there to fight, and Kuja's like, no, I'm going to step back and away from it. And, like, he'll save Zidane, like, a couple of times, and he's like, this is like, we're not even yet, but, like, I'm doing my part, and basically, like, I'm going to leave you alone for the most part. I'm going to keep to myself because I have the time to be introspective. I don't have a reason to be here. So, Kuja is this wild character. And the fact that Kuja is my number 2 for Final Fantasy villains, I'm not going to get started on Vayne, but...
Oh, Vayne is good, yeah.
That might be a whole other episode, but I'm going to wrap this up. And so, let's start with Greg, as now that you've kind of gone through Final Fantasy IX, and the question becomes, would you play other Final Fantasy games, or just finish this one if given the time?
I mean, I went into it wanting to finish it, as like a childhood, like, I finally got to do it. But it hasn't been hard, like, I haven't had to force myself, so I'm genuinely into playing more FF9. A little bit beforehand, but before we started recording, I was talking about how, so I had this girlfriend in high school who really, really loved Final Fantasy X. It was literally the only video game she played, but she played it a lot. And she still does, or on good terms, she still does. And so after this, I was a bit like, hey guys, so is FF10 good? Is that worth it? And like, I hear it's like all right, but yeah, I might go back and seek out some.
They're all worth trying, I think. Different ones are going to speak to you more.
Directly playing Final Fantasy games is not something I've like done a whole lot beyond like Remake and like Final Fantasy Adventure. Like my college roommate played through FF15, but when it launched, so before the story patches. So I've seen that before the narrative patch. I don't know if I'm ever gonna play 14, because I know everybody always loves it, and it was free up until level 60, including the award-winning expansion Heavensward or whatever.
Well, it recently came back.
It recently came back?
January 25th.
I appreciate Final Fantasy more, but I think hopefully maybe when I finish FF9, beyond just waiting for Remake Part 2, because I played the Remake, I think it might be nice to like sit down and like actually play another one, but I'll have to figure out which one that'll be.
Yeah.
between Guy and I think all 15 games have been played.
Yep.
So we can help you pick with the next one.
Tony, Az, and I think we've got enough voices for it. Hannah, would you... Well, I mean, finishing Final Fantasy IX, I think was more predicated on Greg, but would you give one of the other Final Fantasies in the series a try?
Yeah. Probably. I would at least, watch a playthrough, which is how I'm most comfortable engaging with video games. I have no nostalgia for Final Fantasy. I didn't play video games as a kid. I didn't. Greg never talked about it in front of me, which was how I got exposed. Greg and my other video game friends did not talk about it in front of me, which was how I absorbed video game knowledge. So I think I am not quite as... My reactions were much less strong than a lot of your reactions, and I think that's probably a big part of it. Fair. Yeah, I also, there were various things I didn't like, but like I said at the beginning, I think the bottom line is that I guess, as Greg said, it was never really a struggle. I never really reached the point of, I don't want to engage with this. It was fun. I had fun for whenever we sat down to play it. And I found the characters, or at least most of them, very charming. I was interested by the world. And I think that's enough for me to at least, look at some of the other games. I also I did see some of Greg playing Remake, which was fun to watch visually. It was very pretty. And I did like a good amount of that. I love it when the villain is capitalism.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, my overall impression of the Final Fantasy franchise, based on my limited engagement with it at this point, is a positive one, and I would have... I'm not burning to go look for others, but if one waved in front of me, I definitely would.
Right on. Az. Well, first I'm going to ask, are there any Final Fantasies that you have not played?
I have admittedly not played 10. I have not played 10.
Don't play 10 too.
I've not. I like the costume designs, but I'm not sure if the gameplay of 10-2 is for me.
The gameplay of 10-2 is good. The game of 10-2 is bad.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so I had it the wrong way. I don't know. I just remember seeing it, and I'm like, well, the costumes are cute.
They are cute.
But, which ones have I not played? It's been a while. I have not played the original Final Fantasy. I have played Final Fantasy 2. Le Onion Knight. I have played... I don't think I've played 5. So, there's a bunch of them, because I played 4 and 6.
We'll talk afterwards.
I played 2. I don't think I have played 2. Does 11 count because it was the first MMO? I don't think 11
a weird
counts.
One.
I did actually play a little bit of 11 because my not the same neighbor, but because it was a friend of mine had 11 on his brother's PlayStation 2, and one time he let me play, and I got him killed, and only now can I appreciate how upset he was at me.
You lose experience when you die in Final Fantasy.
Yep. You lose experience when you die.
You can literally get stuck in D level in an
11.
area.
But
fucking brutal.
God, that's so
I'm
wild.
so sorry, Troy, when I was 9.
Would you check out some of the other Final Fantasies that you have not played?
Oh, absolutely. I have this... It will take me forever to finish them.
Totally fair.
Part of the reason why my initial playthrough of Final Fantasy IX took me so long is, number one, it was not my game. It was a friend's game. The other reason was because I am ADHD to the extreme, and if I get to a really grindy point, or if I get to a lull in the story, with having to progress, RPGs take me forever. One of my favorite RPGs is Shadow Hearts, and it took me 3 years to finish it because of that reason. So I will play them, but it will take me forever to finish them. It's going to take me... This is my favorite Final Fantasy, and it's already going to take me forever to finish it. I love it, though. I do like Final Fantasy. They are movies that you sometimes
Just
play.
like Metal Gear Solid 4.
Oh yeah, that too.
They're TV series that you sometimes play.
Yeah, they're TV series you sometimes play.
I'm not watching a fucking 40-hour movie.
So, and I mean, I like Final Fantasies that were entirely the best received. Like I didn't mind 10. I liked. I mean, granted, like reviews. I didn't play it when it came out, but I've played. I played Final Fantasy 15 and I enjoyed it. I liked it. I didn't play it when it first came out, so I played it after the narrative patch. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. So I thought especially like 15 took a different turn for Final Fantasies, but I don't know. 9's still my favorite. I'm willing to play the ones I haven't played. I need to replay a couple of them because I definitely need to replay the OG 7 after playing the remake. Like, I brushed up on it, but it's like...
There is a 9 remake rumor, by the way. That 9's getting an animated TV series, and there is rumor of a remake.
Fingers crossed.
That they're going to give it the remake treatment?
I hope so.
I hope they don't give it the same remake treatment. I kind of hope they make it the same game. Which I don't hate the differences of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Situation. I just kind of hope they just make an upgraded version of 9, because I think 9 itself is a solid game. But that's my bias speaking.
I don't think the changes that they did for 7 for the 7 remake would work really for 9. But let's move on. Tony, of the Final Fantasies that you have not played, would you give them a shot?
So, ones that I'm like immediately interested in are finishing 5, because I got about halfway through. Mm-hmm. I would like to revisit 8, because I started 8 in high school and bought it for my friend. She's like, this is my favorite game. You lose it, you die. I'm like, oh man, I'm really excited. And I just remembered fucking hating all the characters in that game. I don't know what it was about 8. I didn't care. The combat, like I hated that you had to steal magic to use magic. That was like the worst thing in the world.
Also stats.
Yeah. Oh god. I was just like, there were so many things that irked me.
Heard about that. That was dumb as hell.
And I feel like I should give it another chance.
You should give it a fair shake.
Right. I feel like I can't fully shit on a game until I actually beat it, right? You know? So like, it's not fair for me to judge 8 until I played it all the way through, and then I can talk shit about it.
Yeah.
It's like my buddy Jeff, who watches all the worst anime just so he can flame kids on 4chan about it.
Shout out to Jeff.
That was his favorite thing. Oh yeah, I'm gonna watch Darling in the Franxx so I can tell you how much of a fucking idiot you are.
Shout out to Jeff.
Oh my god.
It's like, Jesus Christ, Jeff.
I didn't know anyone.
I don't know if I hate myself that much.
He literally consumes shitty media just to talk about it.
Beautiful.
That seems like
Guy has met Jeff, so Guy also understands.
I get it. Jeff is a very particular individual.
The funniest single person I've ever met. But yes, 8 is one of those I want to go visit. I want to finish 5, and I'd like to play 6 again. I have 4 on
Pixel Remake coming out soon.
I have Final Fantasy 3, which is American Final Fantasy 3 is actually Final Fantasy 6 in Japan, because until 7, it was all sorts of fucky.
We're not getting into that.
Yeah. So
not
I would
today.
So probably revisit 4 and 6 as well. So yeah, I pretty much just want to play all of them again, is what I'm saying.
Fair enough. Do a count up. That'd be fun.
Yeah, there we go.
And I'm actively playing 14, as I've discussed. Endwalker was a fantastic expansion. I also want to revisit some of the ones that I don't think I gave a fair shake to, which is mostly 8 and a little bit 3 and maybe 2 with the Pixel remasters existing now.
I love Final Fantasy.
I'm very happy with how this episode turned out. Let's go back around. Greg, where can we find you?
You can find me either on Twitter at GurkCandlestick for myself, or at Ghost_Train. That's the Twitter for Ghost on a Train, the actual play podcast I run and edit. Guy's in it, Hannah's in it. It's on the same network as Disc Space. It's real good. You should give it a listen. I work really hard on it, and so do they. But I also edit. So
Greg works so hard on it.
Than us.
Well, Guy also helps me with some of the Patreon editing. So
okay, but you work
Greg,
harder on it than Guy.
I do the editing and then I send it to you, and then you give it like the magic touch. You put more effort into the show. That's fine.
Also, Guy has edited like 2 episodes. You've edited like 42.
It's not on the same level.
Okay.
No offense, Guy.
Either way, I'm nothing without my friends. But if you liked any of the 3 of us, you'll like Ghost on a Train.
Probably.
It's great.
Hannah, where can we find you?
I am also on Ghost on a Train.
As you might have heard.
Yes, and aside from that, I am on Twitter at I'mTired81, a handle that I came up with in high school and has never stopped being accurate.
Was the 81 some sort of misdirection, like you didn't want people to think you were younger or something?
I don't remember why I put the 81.
Az, where can we find you?
These days I'm mostly on Twitter, but I have a Patreon under the same name. Twitter and Patreon, I am a Heroic Nonsense, all one word, but the O in nonsense is a 0. You can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Patreon, and you can find me on Twitch. You can also see my first 8 hours streams of, I think they're currently still up, of Final Fantasy IX on there, where every other...
I don't know if they're going to be up by the time this episode
probably
is,
not, but I could probably save them. But where every other word was Vivi, my boy, and Steiner, himbo extreme. That was every other word. But yes, that's where I'm at.
Dope. Tony, where can we find you?
You can find me at any of the various Faustian Nonsense Twitter accounts that I run. You can find me at DiCaro-Smith on Twitter. Or any of the other FN accounts if you'd like to reach me.
I'm Guy. You can find me by sending an email to @discspacepod@gmail.com. Maybe on Twitter soon enough, or through the various Faustian Nonsense channels. Check me out on Ghosts on a Train, as has been previously stated. And with that, we have been the Disc Space Cadets, and we are ejecting. Take care, y'all.
Oh no! Oh no, I don't have my spacesuit!
Disc Space is blasting off again.
Brought to you by Faustian Nonsense and
Greg Carrobis. I run and edit Ghosts on a Train. You can find me on Twitter at GergCandlestick.
Hannah Levin from Ghosts on a Train. Twitter at I'mTired81.
Tony DiCaro-Smith, Marketing Director of Faustian Nonsense and player in East Coast Adventures.
Guy Zwiebel from Ghosts on a Train at Ghosts_Train on Twitter.
My name is Azrael, and I'm a freelance illustrator. You can find my art and other hot takes on pop culture media over on Twitter at Heroic Nonsense, except nonsense is spelled with a 0 instead of an O.
Thank you for playing